What's up, guys? This video is gonna be about some technical stuff. And to be more precise, it's about how to get sharp images. Now, I know some of you might already be familiar with the foundations of photography, others aren't. It doesn't matter to which category you belong. I know that everybody, sooner or later, struggles to get sharp images out of their cameras. And there might be different reasons for that. Let's discuss some of the most, popular or unpopular reasons for unsharp or blurry images. First of all, your image might be out of focus or misfocused. So this is something that happens every now and then. Don't worry too much about it. Unless you focus manually, you should really consider using autofocus, because autofocus is, first of all, much faster than you are, and it's way more precise than your manual focusing. But this is not what we want to talk about today in huge detail. Let's focus much more on the second reason for blurry or unsharp images. To be more precise, the shutter speed is the main reason for your images to be blurry or not as sharp as they could be. Now let's get a little bit more into detail. The shutter speed is the main reason for most images to be not as sharp as they could be. And in particular, the shutter speed is too long most of the time. So you should consider choosing a shutter speed that is sufficient for you to be able to handhold it without your camera being moved around. Now, let's discuss why shutter speed can be a problem in photography. Now, to understand an exposure, you need to understand that the exposure consists of three main parts. First of all is your aperture. The second part, which plays a center role, is the shutter speed. And the third part is your ISO, which is also really important. Now you need to find a good balance between all of these three values. And to get that, I would suggest you give the camera the task of finding the right shutter speed for you. Now this makes life much easier because you don't have to watch and control all of the three values at the same time, which is pretty much impossible. And for that reason, I would suggest you choose Aperture Priority as your exposure mode, which means that you choose the aperture and you choose the depth of field. And in this mode, the camera will give you a proper shutter speed, which matches the situation and the aperture that you chose. The problem with this mode is that shutter speeds can be as long as 30 seconds, which is impossible to shoot handheld. I mean, well, it's possible, but it doesn't look really good. So what you need to do is take the third part into consideration, which is the ISO. Now, the ISO is the image sensitivity. Now, what I would suggest is that you put ISO into auto mode, but you should really configure that auto mode to work for you and not against you. Now, what I mean by that, you have to check your camera or your camera manual if there is a possibility to give a minimum shutter speed for your auto ISO setting. Because with that, you will always get the lowest possible ISO, but you will also always get a minimum shutter speed that you select. Which means you cannot take blurry images anymore. Your images are always as sharp as possible if you get the focus right. And that is a dream configuration. I mean, you can shoot pretty much careless, choose the depth of field that you want, and be sure to have an image that is sharp. Now that's wonderful. Now, what kind of shutter speed would you need to choose? That depends a lot on the kind of subject that you want to shoot, and it also depends a lot on the focal length that you want to choose. But for general photography, like taking a photo of a church or a portrait or landscape or maybe even children playing around, and not going beyond maybe 100 or 150 millimeters focal length, you could set up your auto ISO to give you a minimum shutter speed of a 200th of a second. That should be good for almost everything that you can imagine. Once you see that some images are not as sharp as they should be, you should analyze the images. What kind of blurriness do you see there? Is it a focus issue? Or maybe your shutter speed isn't quite where it should be. So if you shoot on a 400 millimeter lens, or if you have some really fast moving subjects like, a racing car, that 200th of a second might not be sufficient and you would need to be even higher than that. So play around with that. But that's the way that I take most of my images, unless I'm here in the studio or I'm doing some kind of like tripod stuff, very controlled conditions. But for run and gun type photography, handheld shots, documentary photography, and even also travel photography, I like to be in a Aperture Priority and Auto ISO. Now I hope these settings help you get more control over your photos. I appreciate your feedback. I also appreciate any additional information that might help others to get this problem out of their way. And I hope to see you next time, guys. Stay healthy and see you soon, hopefully.